There's been a lot of things said here today, and I want to suggest to you some ways of looking at this that I'm not sure have been suggested as of yet. But to tee this topic up, I want to call attention to the fact, once again, of what this bill actually is about. This bill is about two things. It is about making the default execution method to be carried out by electrocution. The default, because currently, as you know, someone awaiting execution have the opportunity, the choice to choose their execution method under state law. Currently, we allow two methods, electrocution and lethal injection. We cannot obtain any lethal injections, and as a result, those awaiting execution choose the method that they know is unavailable. And that's the other thing that this bill is about, is that we currently have a de facto moratorium on the death penalty. I questioned my colleague, Mr. Newton, about this earlier, and time ran out before he could fully answer my question. But I don't think it's really arguable in here. I don't think anyone would argue against the fact that we have a de facto moratorium on the death penalty right now today. And this bill ends that. The way this bill ends that is by stipulating that a person who's going to make the choice has to choose a method that is actually available at the time. In other words, you can't choose lethal injection as the execution method if the state has no lethal injection. So effectively, it's taking lethal injection off the table. I think if we were going to be fully honest about what we were doing, we would have struck that option from the statute, but we didn't do that in this bill. So we're replacing a de facto moratorium on executions with a de facto moratorium on lethal injections. In reality, that's what this bill does. In addition, this bill adds a new option, and that is execution by firing squad. Now, there are a few things at play here, and it would surprise no one to hear me say that I am pro-life. I'm absolutely staunchly pro-life. That's not up for debate. And traditionally, as some of my colleagues have expressed, the pro-life position has been that if you want to protect life, that you must be for the death penalty because of the value of human life. Human life matters. Taking an innocent human life is a serious thing. It is. If your argument is to say that the righteous and just penalty for killing an innocent human being is the death penalty, I would not argue with you. I agree with that basic premise. However, there's more than just the penalty to justice. There's also the application of the penalty. And if we're going to uphold justice, if we're going to do justly, love mercy as God commands us, and walk humbly with God, that means that we also have to care about the application of justice, not just the just penalty itself. We can't stand in here and pretend that our justice system gets it right 100% of the time without fail. Just in case anybody missed that, I'll repeat myself. We can't stand in here and pretend that our justice system gets it right, even in South Carolina, 100% of the time. And I doubt anybody in here would even argue with me on that statement. So in reality, we have to ask ourselves if there is any possibility that we could be wrong in handing out a death penalty verdict. Doesn't the death penalty make injustice permanent? Doesn't the death penalty make injustice permanent? And I would suggest to you, my friends, that in that light, from a pro-life perspective, we would have to argue that actually taking an innocent human life, someone who is wrongfully convicted for a violent crime, who is awaiting execution, who receives execution, is 100% just as heinous, 100% just as unjust as taking an unborn human out of their mother's womb. By the way, both are legal. By the way, both are legal under the law. By the way, both are unjust. I asked my colleague earlier, and he did not have the answer. How many capital convictions in South Carolina have been overturned? I can't tell you what that looks like in South Carolina. I can tell you that nationwide it is a 1 in 9 wrongful conviction rate of capital crimes. 1 in 9. My friends, I am not comfortable with handing out a death penalty verdict when we get 1 in 9 wrong nationwide. Now, I believe that it would behoove us to keep the moratorium, the de facto moratorium on the death penalty in place while we sort out our justice system, while we check and take inventory and take stock and see, okay, are we getting it right or not? This would be a great juncture for us to do that. If we care about justice, we've talked about penalties for crimes recently in this body, reducing sentences and so forth. Different ones of us, we're on different sides of that issue. That's fine. We can talk about what is the just penalty of a given crime. We also have to care about the just application and the just carrying out of that sentence. Judges don't always get it right. Juries don't always get it right. Attorneys don't always get it right. Prosecutors don't always get it right. And you know what? If you're honest, you'll look at yourself and you'll say, I don't always get it right. Not one of us here is perfect. Not any institution which is comprised of living, breathing human beings is ever going to be perfect. And so I think we have an important question to ask ourselves, as long as that's the case. Are we qualified to be carrying out a death sentence? Now, there's also the question of, and even if you believe the answer to that is yes, by the way, even if you believe the answer to that is yes, if you believe that it is possible to be sure 100% of the time when we carry out an execution that was deserved, what do we have to say to the fact that every single one of us here today deserves the death penalty for something? For something, under God's law. Not one of us here is perfect. Every one of us here that are living and breathing today is a recipient of God's mercy. Let us not think that it is somehow justice for us to refuse to entertain the possibility that we extend mercy to someone that we believe is worthy of death. I'm not saying that we don't punish crimes, but I'm saying that we leave open the possibility of correcting a wrong if we get it wrong. Once you execute that person, that's permanent. You can't bring them back to life. No, sir. There's also the other aspect here too. If we care about life, if we believe that human life is weighty and important and matters, we care about justice and the application of justice. That also means that we have to care about how a just execution sentence is carried out. And honestly, folks, I am quite astounded that in the 21st century civilization that we think that death by electric chair is okay. I thought we were civilized people. I thought we were living in the 21st century. One of our colleagues earlier described in graphic, vivid detail how an electric chair execution is carried out. I've never watched such a thing, don't want to watch such a thing. But sometimes we need to be reminded of what that looks like, what we're talking about. We're not talking about something that's theoretical here. We're talking about something that has very real, vivid, graphic, tangible impacts on human beings. And if we care about human life, we care about people that are wronged, And we also care about the humanity of even the wrongdoer, because we see in that wrongdoer something in ourselves, something of ourselves. We look into that offender's eye and we see ourselves staring back. And we say, but for the grace of God, there go I. We should tremble in fear at such a thought. When we think about the dignity with which an execution, a just execution, should be carried out, I'm reminded of one Mr. Albert Pierpont. Albert Pierpont is the man that nobody seemingly has ever heard of these days, the British guy who was the executioner for the British government for many years, for 25 years in fact. During his time, he executed many people, many notorious, heinous criminals who, I'm not going to argue, absolutely deserved the death penalty. I'm sure he would argue that as well. He probably wouldn't have carried it out based on things he said later in life if he hadn't believed that they were guilty and proven guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. However, what's notable is that even for the most heinous of criminals, Mr. Albert Pierpont perfected the process of carrying out an execution. He was doing it by hanging. Apparently, we're too sophisticated for hanging. We're not too sophisticated for zapping someone to death in a chair. Don't ask me to explain that, but that's where we are. He was so methodical in the way that he would carry out his executions that he would go and personally look at the person he was going to execute beforehand, size them up. He's literally checking their frame. He's looking, is this person built larger than an average person of this size? He would get their physical measurements, their height. He would get their weight. And he would go back to his lab. He would create some sacks that weighed approximately the same as this person that he was going to execute. He would get his rope. He would calculate the length that the rope needed to be. He would practice. He would simulate the execution. And then he would leave that sack hanging on that rope for 24 hours before the execution. Why? Because if he didn't, that rope might stretch a little bit during the hanging when the trap door released. The person's neck may not be broken. He believed that an execution should be smooth, it should be swift, it should be 100% reliable, and he achieved that. He achieved that. Why? Well, he explained in his own words. He said, I have gone on record as saying that my job is sacred to me. That sanctity must be most apparent at the hour of death. A condemned prisoner is entrusted to me after decisions have been made which I cannot alter. He is a man, she is a woman, who, the church says, still merits some mercy. The supreme mercy I can extend to them is to give them and sustain in them their dignity in dying and death. The gentleness must remain. This is the British High Executioner saying this. I think it's also important and instructive for us to understand that despite the fact that he conducted many different executions and hangings, including during and after World War II, a list that includes many very heinous people, such as 15 German spies, 2 saboteurs, 13 German war criminals. Over a period of time after World War II, he executed 226 people that were convicted of war crimes. He trained staff in Austria on his method of the long drop kill, which involved snapping the prisoner's neck during the hanging. However, of note, when the Nuremberg trials were held, convicting the most heinous within the Nazi regime. Mr. Pierpont was the perfect candidate for the job, and yet he was not given the job. Instead, the Allied forces sought out, brought back into service, a disgraced and washed-up soldier, one American Master Sergeant John Woods. He was inexperienced. He had a reputation for botching executions, for botching hangings in particular. He was brought in to do the job. Why? Because the Allies wanted to make an example of these individuals, and they wanted them to suffer. They wanted them to suffer. In fact, they did suffer. Rather than Mr. Pierpont's smooth, reliable, perfected, scientific method of execution, Master Sergeant John Woods conducted executions, which in one case took 20 minutes for the person to die after a trap door opened. The trap was not wide enough. Some of the men hit the edges as they fell. More than one person's nose was torn off in the process. Others were strangled rather than having their necks broken. They died. Justice was carried out. But what does it say about us when we want them to suffer? What it says about us is we've forgotten our own sinfulness. We've forgotten our own mortality when we delight and we seek out the suffering of others, even those that are just, even those that deserve it, even those that deserve a very painful, excruciating, drawn-out death. And folks, if that's where we are, why aren't we bringing the guillotine? Why aren't we bringing public executions? Why aren't we bringing burning at the stake? Why aren't we bringing hangings back? Why limit it to firing squad and electric chair? By the way, if you're cool with the electric chair, you may as well be cool with burning at the stake, because there have been actual recorded, documented cases where the victim literally caught fire. Why do you think they shave the head? Why do you think they shave the body? So that the hair can't catch on fire. It can still happen, though. What does it say about us when our Constitution, which we swore our oath to protect and defend, and we read in Amendment 8 that cruel and unusual punishments must not be inflicted, shall not. That is strong legal language. You attorneys in here know that. Shall not. That is a mandate on us. And we cast that aside and we act like those words aren't there. We say one thing when we come into office and we come down here and do something else. And we think that people aren't supposed to notice. And maybe we think that they won't notice. And maybe they won't notice. But I'll tell you who does notice. And that is God. And that is God, who you can be thankful that he holds justice and mercy in perfect balance as it has to do with you and me. We all deserve to die. And yet our founding fathers understood from their own experience, from their own history, that to secure the blessings of liberty for themselves and for their posterity, in other words, us, that certain protections on the evil darkness of human nature had to be put into place, that even if a person deserved to be crucified, a long, hours-long, drawn-out, torturous method of execution, carrying out the death penalty, but with pain and suffering and torture involved, or drawing and quartering somebody, which is so graphic that I shudder to even describe it here for you today, or burning someone at the stake in excruciating agony. Methods of execution well known to our founding fathers. Methods of execution they knew well that they may face when they signed the Declaration of Independence. They knew that cruel and unusual punishments should not be handed out by any government institution over a free nation, over a free people. And here we are. We think we're better than them. We think we're smarter than them. We think what they did doesn't matter. We think that an electric chair execution is not cruel and unusual. We think that cruel and unusual only applies to punishments of living people, and we forget that during that interval from when the execution begins to when the execution concludes, that that person is still alive, and that the only reason to want someone to suffer and feel pain during that interval when they are still alive before they expire is to satisfy some inner longing of ourselves to see that person get their just reward. And we take some kind of personal satisfaction in that. Look in yourselves, folks.